Hey everyone, my name is Dave Nixon and welcome back to another Peak and Flow podcast. I do apologise, it has been a little patchy. Yes, I did promise that I'd be back on doing 3 a week. However, it's been nuts this last couple of weeks. I had 3 this month, or July, I had 3 weddings in Queensland, living in Canberra. It was a bit of a trek, so Gold Coast, Noosa, and then Townsville. So I was away for 10 days of that, which was a bit nuts. Fair bit of travel. Good fun, though. Good time with friends and family. And then I came back, and actually, fun enough, and I want to talk about it on a later podcast, but I had about a week and a half here. Actually just under, probably about 8 days. And 2 of those days were actually set aside for, I had a psilocybin journey, and an experience with the 5-MeO DMT, which I'll probably go into, I guess, on another podcast. For those that are familiar with psychedelics and those that are not, this is coming from a person that has never touched outside of alcohol and caffeine and one little pouch of snus nicotine once, which made me sick. I have never touched anything, and so I experienced that with quite a very profound and experienced facilitator, psychotherapist, who's also spent time with like native Mexicans and learnt from their rich history around it, let alone in other areas of North America, so South America rather. So anyway, that's both. So that's another conversation. I'm sure I'll share that later on. But came back, had that, and then we just had our first level 2, our first flow retreat. So Peak and Flow, we run retreats, but the retreats are actually a development program. And today I want to actually talk you through what's involved in a base retreat. So maybe you've been interested, maybe you haven't, but to talk you through how we put this together, so we see it not just as a singular, let's take people away and, you've got these opportunities to do some yoga or to do some single sort of events. We actually go, hang on a sec, this is a personal development program. Even with the base retreat, a 2-day retreat, a flow retreat's a 3-day retreat. So 3 nights, 2 days with a base retreat. Flow retreat is 4 nights, 3 days. And then our peak retreat, our level 3 retreat, is 5 nights, 4 days. And so there's a structure behind that. We wanted the base retreat to be an actual development program. So if somebody was to opt in for that, that would be a full program. We then wanted the flow retreat to actually build on to what the base retreat was. And so even though each retreat itself is a program, which, has a middle, a beginning, and an end, has a curriculum, a pedagogy, the whole 3 types of retreats, that's a whole program as well. So we've structured it in a way which is allowing people to get away and, yes, spend some time on themselves, but really open up, I guess. They meet it where they're at. It's they participate to the level they're at, but to really have an opportunity to let themselves in, I guess. So I want to talk you through that today and how we actually build it. Funnily enough, we looked at this and we're like, how do we explain the base retreat? And it's like, well, it's a one-of-a-kind experience. And what that means is that it's an individual experience, both subjective and physical, right, objective. And the one-of-a-kind is actually pointing out kinship, which is a common unity. And so it's this beautiful tip of the hat to how people will learn at those events as an individual. And funnily enough, the more that they contribute and the more that they share, not that they need to, it's not about going and sharing feelings, it's about sharing experiences or sharing learnings, sharing the conversation and doing that up to the level that they feel comfortable doing so, then, well, there should be a little bit of a stretch, but that's another conversation. Then we learn more as a group. We know we learn more as a group when people are engaging and asking questions. And so being able to provide a space where people have the opportunity to make that space feel safe for themselves is exceptionally important. Yet we want to make sure that we're there to support and challenge. We don't force anyone to do any part of it. People literally meet up to the level of where they're at. And so the way that the base retreat is actually structured is there's day 0, which is you get there on the Thursday night. We talk through the framing for the weekend, what to expect, what the breakout groups are. So we have, approximately 12 people, and then we have 4 facilitators. So those breakout groups are groups of 3 to 4 people with one facilitator throughout the weekend. So we have continual touch points for people to ask questions in smaller groups and have shares around that, so we can deepen the learning. But day one, up to day 0, day one is the Friday, and day one is physiology. So we actually go into breath work, understanding the breath and the importance of not just oxygen but CO2 and gas exchange. We then also go into polyvagal theory a little bit, which is really looking at our nervous system 101, and seeing both, of course, sympathetic and parasympathetic, but understanding there's no bad parts of our nervous system. How do we learn to access what's required within us at any given time? We do have cold exposure. There's cold exposure with different forms of intent. Now, I've spoken about cold exposure on this podcast, but really the cold exposure is about allowing people an opportunity to get what they're learning and actually have an exposure to something that they can play with that with. So we have a rule called look, play, learn, and look, play, learn is look at these models, look at these frameworks. Now let's go play with it and come back and look at them again and see them with brand new eyes. And this is a way that we can move from know-ofing or knowing about something to relating with it and moving through to embodying it, right? With the knowledge, that is. And so from there, we have a workout later in the day, and then we finish off with some bend and breathing, and then we have dinner, which is lovely. Day 2 is the psychology component of it. Now, psychology is a broad term, so the stuff that we cover is basically meaning making, levels of perception. So we use the quadrants from Ken Wilber's body of work, which is exceptionally profound, but really about learning different first, second, third, and fourth person perspective. From there, we also lean on some other bodies of work that allow us to sort of identify different patterns of thinking. So we mainly lean on Michael Hall's work, Dr. Michael Hall, which is called metaprograms. And metaprograms allow us to identify, we go through about 10, but there's 60 metaprograms, 60 patterns of thinking that we may lean into different variations of each category of that 60 and how that shows up for us. And so it allows us to sort of interact and start to see and start to ground what is subjective in nature, right? Which is the way that we think, the way that we make meaning. So grounding what's subjective in nature to be able to have something that we can kind of measure against and have a framework for our subjectivity. And so this is where we go past the idea of just thinking positive, or how do I reframe something positively, which actually presupposes that it's actually a negative experience. If you catch that, if I'm trying to reframe something positively, can you hear it in the language? Trying, right? To reframe something positively, it's literally presupposing it's a negative experience. And so it's more about, well, what's your relationship with negativity, or what you deem to be negative? Is that the actual, problem behind the problem? So the reframe might be just simply allowing us to ignore the symptom that's really showing up for us, which is a deeper problem. And so we're attempting to make sure that we're giving people these frameworks so that they can really lean on an understanding for themselves how they can start to really show up both in mind and body, and how they overlap with each other as well. And so the beauty of this is that the whole weekend builds on itself, from going through the nervous system and breath work and our kinesthetic intelligence through to being able to have different exposures. Now, the property, by the way, is on 600 acres. It's a beautiful sort of 2 chalets put together with some lovely high roofs, some fireplaces that we use throughout the weekend. And the Kangaroo Valley River actually runs through the property. And so we use that on the second morning for our cold exposure, which is just absolutely stunning. You can see more on our Instagram at Peak and Flow Training. It's a really beautiful weekend. And so wrapping up the day 2, we go through a workout to put all of the learnings for that weekend into something that we can actually really attempt to ground ourselves with and test ourselves with as well. From there, we go into some more bending, some breathing to wind down before a lovely dinner and final night. Before the next morning, we have a panel about integrating back into reality, packing up, and then off we go. And so the bodies of work that we lean on with this retreat is really quite profound. And my role is more going, how do these fit together, and how do we go, what's the first person subjective experience, what's the second person shared experience, what third person is a body experience, and then fourth person is what's the plans and systems and structures, and how do we make sure that we cover all of this in 2 short days? And really the base retreat's an intro for what can be so much more. And so more than happy, another time I'll probably go through and explain. I might even do it next call as well, our flow retreat, which was a really beautiful experience on the weekend. I'm very fortunate. I feel very fortunate to facilitate that for the individuals that were there. But this to me has become exceptionally important work. I'm exceptionally proud of it. I feel very grateful standing on the shoulders of giants and being able to share that with the facilitators that we have, but also the attendees that we've had as well. So we've done 8 base retreats now. That was our first flow retreat. This is our 9 retreats. The next one's September, and then another one in February. Then our next flow retreat's in April. So the retreats are just one product that we have within Peak and Flow, and this podcast isn't about selling them. It's about educating on them. It's like, this isn't a normal retreat. I'm not interested in just, setting up a retreat where people kind of just work out and then chill out and then work out and then chill out. There's plenty of them, and they're great. Ours is for people that are wanting something more, that want to be around people wanting something more, right? That is just kind of sick of the positivity mindset stuff. They want to actually ground it and challenge themselves, and also learn more about their whole nervous system, right? For a lot of people, we have habituated our way of being. We have habituated our way of being for years and years and years, and we call that nature. But how much of that is nurture, and how much of that is not serving us anymore? And so our job and our role with these retreats is to really facilitate a space for people to see that for themselves and make their own decisions. So, yeah, it's more, obviously the Peak and Flow community is extended past the retreats, but it really is fundamentally powered by them. And so, on top of that, the thing that I'm really excited for the back end of this year is putting together our events. The events that we'll be running are ICE, MAP, and B, where ICE stands for Introduction to Cold Exposure, MAP stands for Mindset and Performance, and B stands for Breath Experience. And so we'll be looking to facilitate and host these events over the coming probably 5 months leading into Feb's base retreat and beyond as well. But making sure we've got, little snippets for people that are already in the community to continue to attend and be a part of it. And for people wanting to find out more about how they can leverage those areas, both, cold exposure, the mindset, and also breath, to be able to get more out of there every day. On top of that, you're welcome to also join our Moments webinar. It's a free webinar. It's live every Wednesday. It's not recorded. The whole idea is that people need to be there and be in the moment, so to speak. And so from there, we discuss a whole range of things. This week, we'll be discussing putting on an integral life practice from what we spoke about at the Flow Retreat. But it will be interesting for those that didn't attend as well, and whatever other questions come up. So those webinars have been really beautiful to be a part of and to facilitate once again, but they're free every Wednesday. So you can just sign up I think it's in the show notes of this podcast. But that's me done. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you found this podcast beneficial, then please share it either on socials or with a friend. If you share it on socials, make sure you tag us. That's Peak and Flow Training, or myself, Dave Nixon Flow. Otherwise, yeah, you want to find out more about the retreats, they should be in the show notes as well. Or if you've got questions, reach out. More than happy to answer. I'm very accessible. Otherwise, I'm done. Until next time, peace and pizza. I'll see you soon.